Well, good morning. I'm Rick Weddle. I'm President and CEO of the Research Triangle Park, and you are now in Plenary Session 1, Knowledge Ecosystems, the Present and Future of Innovative Economies. The concept of future knowledge ecosystem is based on the assertion that ever-increasing globalization is forcing regions to become more specialized to provide a unique value proposition that ultimately sets them apart from others. For almost 50 years, science and technology parks have been a leading model for developing such specialization, helping regions build and nurture an economic base comprised of firms that constantly innovate and maximize the use of technology and idea creation. The models for such activity have evolved over the years and have taken many forms beyond the traditional single-use science parks. As globalization has become more pervasive, there is an added impetus for science and technology parks and innovative regions to be even more integrated into the regional economies that surround them. In addition, the impetus to create relationships with like or complementary entities around the world will also increase. So what do these future knowledge ecosystems look like? To help us identify the future characteristics of economically dynamic places that can drive innovation, enhance business competitiveness, and attract talent, I'd like to introduce the invited speaker, Anthony Townsend. Anthony is a technology forecaster and strategist with the Institute for the Future, an independent nonprofit research group based in Palo Alto, California. Anthony leads the Institute's research on innovation systems and economic development and is currently conducting a multi-year study on the future of science parks and incubators. Prior to joining the Institute, Anthony enjoyed a decade-long career in academia, where his research focused on the role of telecommunications in urban development and design. He has lived and worked in South Korea. He is an urban planning consultant and a Fulbright scholar. And during this period, he has conducted several major research projects funded by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Homeland Security. Anthony holds a PhD in urban and regional planning from MIT. And for the better part of the past 2 years, Anthony has been working in partnership with the Research Triangle Park to identify the top trends, conditions, and issues that will be impacting science parks and technology-led economic development in the years to come, and in turn to forecast scenarios and recommendations. Please turn your attention to Anthony Townsend as he unveils their work.
Well, let me start by thanking Rick for having the vision and the leadership to actually launch this study and being such a great partner, and everyone at the Research Triangle Foundation for helping us organize this study and present it to you today. I want to start out a whirlwind tour of the future of science parks by going back in time to last year, when a lot of us had the opportunity to go to Johannesburg and visit the Innovation Hub in Pretoria, which is Southern Africa's first science park. And I think anyone that was there can agree that this is a really impressive, inspiring, and ambitious step forward for science parks in Africa. But I think it's even more interesting to think about what Africa's next science park might look like. And to get even crazier, let's fast forward to 2030, about 2 decades in the future, and try and imagine what might happen when African inventors gain access to new, very inexpensive tools for innovation. Things like cloud computing, which delivers supercomputing as a utility to any device in the world. Open source software like Ubuntu, which is actually a South African invention. It's a South African-based distribution of Linux that's based around tribal ideas of sharing intellectual property. Rapid prototyping and fabrication tools that allow very small-scale manufacturers to design and manufacture products, almost 3D printing, if you will, pioneered by Neil Gershenfeld at MIT. Desktop biotechnology. Some of the tools of biotechnology are now becoming very, very affordable for small-scale innovators and even garage startups. Knowledge commons, sites like Instructables that calls itself the world's biggest show and tell, and it's just for people who want to share ideas they have about building things in the real world and inventions. And new ways of financing technology ventures like peer-to-peer microfinance, which lets people pool small amounts of money and lend them to each other. And if you imagine a world where South Africans are using these tools, creating thousands of innovations every day, not just taking Western technology and translating it for African markets, but actually creating new inventions that can be marketed globally. And imagine this not happening necessarily in a science park, but in the warehouses and garages of some place like Soweto. And this would not be the first revolution to come out of Soweto. As we all know, this is one of the incubators of the political and social movement that transformed apartheid there. We can certainly see a plausible future where these new tools, these new ways of organizing innovation allow a place like Soweto to do the kinds of technological innovation that traditionally have required much bigger research campuses. And so these are the kinds of things that we did in building this scenario, is to imagine what are some plausible but provocative futures, not because we're interested in predicting what the future will turn out like, and it's very hard to know that, but to be able to ask ourselves a question: if we knew this would come true, what would we do differently today as developers, managers of science parks, economic development officials? What does this world mean for us? How would we fit into it? And this is really the objective of building these kinds of forecasts. We surveyed a very, very broad swath of people in this room, experts in architecture, real estate development, public policy, technology transfer, through a series of workshops that Research Triangle Foundation organized. We also drew upon the Institute for the Future's ongoing trend research, looking 50 years out at the future of science and technology, looking at innovation over the next decade, and looking at trends in urbanization and mobility throughout the world. So first, what I'd like to do is walk through 14 trends that we identified as being the big stories, the big developments over the next 2 decades that will shape how science parks and how innovative places more generally develop. And then I'll walk you through 3 scenarios that we developed using those trends as foundations. I'm going to run through these. I only have time to give you a flavor of this trend research, but at the end, I'll give you a link, and you can download the full white paper, which goes into great detail, not just about the research that we use to develop these trends, but also some thoughts about specifically how they might impact science parks and technology regions going forward.